inside my heart I feel it would shout like a crowd dancing. I guess I can live without things that make my life what it is.
Ha! I promised it would come soon, didn't I? And so it has. I am reviewing the movie Pandorum, which I venture not many of you have seen because the box office numbers were frankly pretty abysmal. And I don't think necessarily entirely so. I don't think this is the best movie, but I do think it is a perfectly competent sci-fi horror movie, and considering the lack of that genre, or lack of movies in that genre, I do think it's at least enjoyable in that respect if you're looking for something along these lines. Personally, I think space is a great place for horror despite the scarcity of movies. It really adds to the feeling of claustrophobia and just being alone, you know? There's no way you can go back. Anyway, actually, just one quick thing. I am surprised there's fewer of these movies that aren't D-grade at least. Considering the success of Aliens, there hasn't really been any aside from like Event Horizon and a few other movies I can quickly place out. If you know any, please recommend them to me. Probably will have seen them, but just in case, I appreciate it. Alright, getting on quickly, Pandorum is, in short, about this guy who wakes up from a cryo sleep and doesn't know really who he is, what his purpose was, where he is, outside of the fact that he's on a spaceship, and that he knows he is from a specific team on board that ship, and especially so why the ship is not functioning the way it should be. There is no electricity, and what it is very scarce and comes at random intervals. As the movie wears on, he finds a few other crew members and something else that is lurking aboard the ship. I won't spoil it, but I will say that I was somewhat disappointed in what is lurking in the ship. The design for the lurkers is not particularly original. It really kind of struck me as cannibal meets tribal, but outside of that, they were still pretty cool. I will say they did provide an adequate villain. That said, the plot I thought was well handled for the first half an hour or so when it was all mystery, but it did somewhat degrade in the last half because once everything is revealed, it really is kind of trite, and we have seen it before. But I suppose that's kind of typical of the genre because really once you know the mystery of something, there's really no going back from that. The whole anticipation was in build-up of what the answer to that mystery was. Anyway, outside of that, the plot does progress with a rather nice clip. I will say, though, I did find it kind of dubious, if you will, that there is one black guy that I meet in the movie, and, well, it's nowhere along the level of the robots in Transformers, but, yeah. Anyway, it moved at a pretty nice clip. It ended on a fairly, actually a fairly positive note, and I thought the movie overall was quite enjoyable. It wasn't exactly an amazingly original experience, but for a night out of the movies, if you like this type or this subgenre, it's not bad. We've seen it before, but it's executed pretty well. The camera work especially adds a feeling of claustrophobia, where it's shot very up close to the actors most of the time. Most of the time the movie is in the dark, which is actually not as bad as we would think it is, because we can still see, it's just dark, rather than a Blair Witch style where you literally can't see shit without the flashlight. So that was much appreciated. Shaky cam is used in this movie, but to a lesser extent, and when it is used, it is at very appropriate moments. Effects were done quite well. Sound was, again, very well. Sparse, very sparse, but that is why it was good, because I think these movies thrive on silence, in particular. Outside of that, there really isn't a whole lot to say about the movie. All the actors are basically ones you've never seen before, and if you have, they're in something very small. They're not terrible actors. They're not amazing actors. They just serve their purposes. The only person you will have seen before is, well, I forget his name at the moment, Christ is gonna kill me, but the only person you have seen before is really kind of obvious among the crowd. He's not an incredible actor, don't get me wrong or anything like that, but his name and his face among the bunch of these unknowns will really strike you, and that to yourself, hey, that's that dude. It kind of stands out. I'd almost prefer if they didn't use him, frankly, because it really does take you out of the experience, which this movie does try and create. The atmosphere in this movie is quite nice, even if it is, like I said, somewhat unoriginal. Overall, you should see this movie. It's a pretty good movie. It's not amazing. By the way, that person's name was Dennis Quaid. I can't believe I forgot that person's name. But overall, it's not a bad movie. you'd probably be satisfied just renting it rather than seeing it in theaters. But if you do manage to catch it in theaters, as I think it's still in a few theaters, even despite its terrible box office numbers, it's not bad.